Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Good Chodesh Tov. We are learning Mishnah's Pesachim, Perek Beis, Chapter 2, Mishna 5. Elu Devarim. These are the things Sha'adam Yaitze Behen Chaydei Chayvasei Pesach. That a person fulfills his obligation on Pesach. The Mishnah doesn't say this, but it's talking about matzah. What is it? What are the things? What are the types of grains through which you can fulfill your mitzvah of matzah? You know, on the first night of Pesach, there's an obligation to eat matzah. The rest of the days of Pesach, not only eat chametz, but the obligation to eat matzah, specifically to have a mitzvah to eat matzah on the first night. So what are the types of grains through which you can make matzah and fulfill your obligation? The answer is bachitim, which is wheat, b'sa'orin, barley, b'kusmin, kusmin they translate as spelt.
What?
Spelt, S-P-E-L-T.
That's how it's spelled.
Right. Uveshifain, rye, uveshibai leshual, oats. This is what we call the chamishis minei dagan, the 5 types of grain. And these are the grains by which you can make matzah from. Why these grains specifically? The answer is because we derive from a verse in the Torah that whatever becomes chametz, whatever can become chametz, is what you can make your matzah from. If it cannot become chametz, then you cannot make matzah from it. So, for instance, rice and millet do not become chametz. If you leave them with water, they do not become chametz. They do not leaven, but rather it's called sirchain. They spoil. I don't know what that means exactly, but it's clearly different chemical processes. And one is called chametz, one is called sirchain. And chametz is what the Torah actually forbids us to own on Pesach. We derive from a verse that whatever can become chametz is what you can make your matzah from. So that's the first part of the Mishnah. The next part is the yotzin. You can fulfill your mitzvah with the following types of grain. Now, these types of grain are not a question of species. They have halachic. It's halachic issues, and it's important to understand that you cannot fulfill your mitzvah of matzah with something you're not allowed to eat. If something is forbidden to eat, we don't say, well, you ate it and you transgressed that prohibition, but matzah you still have fulfilled your mitzvah. The answer is, if you're not permitted to eat it, you cannot fulfill your mitzvah through it. So therefore, the Mishnah now tells us, v'yotzin, you can fulfill your obligation, your mitzvah of matzah, b'demai, with demai. Demai, we learned a long time ago. Demai is where you have grain that was bought from an amaretz, from a person who said in an ignoramus. There were some of them who were not careful about separating maasros, the tithings, and if they don't do that, then your grain is tevel. It means it's untithed, it's not fixed, and you're not allowed to eat from it. Now, according to Torah law, you're allowed to eat from this demai because the majority of amaratzim, the majority of the ignorant people, did separate maasros. But the chachamim were stringent, and they said, since there are those who do not, anytime you buy grain from an amaretz, from an ignorant person, you have to go ahead and separate the maasros from it. Now, this guy went ahead and he made matzah out of demai. He had grain, he bought it from amaretz, he did not separate maasros from it. As is, he took it, ground it into flour, baked matzahs from it. And was he allowed to do that? No. Nonetheless, the Mishnah still says, v'yotzin b'demai, you can fill your obligation with demai. Why is that? And the answer is because demai is permitted to a poor person. If you're poor, the Chachamim said, you can rely on the Torah law, you can buy from the amaretz, you don't have to separate maasros. Being that poor people may eat demai, and if you'd like to make yourself poor, go right ahead. How would you do that? You would declare all your property hefker, and you'd be poor. So being that you have the ability to go ahead and eat the mai is not the kind of prohibited food that we say you can't fulfill your mitzvah with. Since it's possible for you to be able to eat this demai, it's possible, even if you didn't do what you're supposed to do, to be able halachically to eat it. Nonetheless, that's not, so to speak, prohibited enough to say that you would not fulfill your mitzvah with it. Next, Ma'aser rishon is after you separate the first, you have new produce. You first separate truma for the kohen. From what's left, you separate ma'aser rishon, the first tithing. That goes to the Levi. The Levi has to take that 10th and separate a 10th from it and give it to the kohen. If he doesn't separate that tenth from his tenth, he's not allowed to eat it. So the Mishnah says, if you separated the truma, if the Levi, after getting his meiser, after getting his tenth, separated a tenth from that to give to the Kohen, the meiser rishon is good to go. You can eat it, make your matzah out of it, fulfill your mitzvah. Over meiser sheni v'hektish sheniftu. Meiser sheni is that after the first tithing, you take another tithing, another tenth. That depending on the year of the 7-year cycle, it has a sanctity. It's got to either be in Yerushalayim or redeemed, and the money in Yerushalayim. And the same thing if you were to take grain and sanctify it. If you were to go ahead and eat it as is, you're forbidden to eat something that's sanctified to the Beis HaMikdash. What do? You can redeem it. So if the Meiser Sheni or the Hektish were redeemed, and therefore now these grains are something you can eat, the money for the Meiser Sheni you take to Yerushalayim and spend it there. The money that you redeemed, what you sanctified, goes to the Beis HaMikdash. But once you've taken care of it, it's mutter to eat. It's permissible to eat. Make your matzah from it. Kohanim can make matzah out of challah and truma. Challah is that when a person bakes a dough, they have to separate a part of it, and give it to the Kohen. And until the person does that, he cannot eat from his dough. And the challah belongs to the Kohen. It's like truma. You're not allowed to eat it. Okay, a Kohen who makes his matzah out of challah dough or out of truma grain, he fulfills his mitzvah. The point of this is that even though other people would not be able to eat from it, as long as he can eat from it, it's okay for him to use it for the mitzvah of matzah. If a non-Kohen, a Levi Yisrael, were to eat matzah of truma or of challah, they wouldn't fulfill their mitzvah. Aval, however, loy b'tevel, you cannot fulfill your mitzvah with grain that is tevel. That means tevel, that all these separations from it, the trimis and all the maisris, have not been separated from it. Not allowed to eat from it. Not allowed to eat from it. You can't fulfill your mitzvah of matzah if you make it from tevel. Nor if you make your matzah out of meiser rishon grain that its truma was not taken. The Levi who had his meiser didn't take a tenth from his tenth. Can't use it for matzah. Nor if you have the meiser sheni, the second meiser, and the sanctified grain that was not redeemed. These are grains you may not eat. If you may not eat it, if you were to make matzah from them, you wouldn't fulfill your mitzvah. Now, next halacha. Chalois toida rakike nazer. If a person has to bring a carbon toida, Thanksgiving offering, he brings 40 loaves of bread. 30 of them are matzah. 10 of them are chametz. So chalois toida means, basically, we call them chalis because that's what they're called, but they're really matzah. So the matzah that you baked for your carbon toida, or rakike nazir. A nazir is a person who has accepted upon himself the vow of naziris, which means he may not cut his hair, he may not drink wine, or partake of anything of grapes, and he cannot make himself impure from a dead body. The Torah says that when his term, meaning when you take upon yourself to be a nazir, you accept it for a certain amount of time. When that time is up, he has to bring a set of offerings, and one of those offerings are 20 matzahs. Okay, now it's you want to go ahead since they're matzah, right? So you bake these matzahs for the taida. I want to use them now for Seder night. I went ahead and guys, the person's a nazir. He baked the matzahs. He's supposed to eat them. He wants to eat them for Seder night. Okay, what's the halacha there? Would he be able to use them for the mitzvah of matzah? So again, he actually the way they I should have translated chalois because they call them loaves. Rakikeim are wafers. That's what they call them, wafers. And it's like an airy bread. Okay, you made them for yourself for your own offering. Okay, and so the case is like this. Okay, case like this. So the person made them for his taida, or he made them for his nazar, and I decided, you know what? I'm not going to use them for that. I'm going to use them for Pesach. Change his mind. So the Mishna says, Ein yotzin behen. You cannot fulfill your mitzvah of matzah with them. Why is that? Because they weren't baked l'shma. They weren't baked l'shem matzah's mitzvah. The halacha is that the grain that you use for matzah has to be guarded for the purpose of using it for the mitzvah of matzah. You got to bake it for the purposes of using it for the mitzvah of matzah. This person who baked these matzahs to use them for something else, he did not have them in mind to use them for Pesach. Since he didn't have mind to use them for Pesach, so he can't use them. However, San limkar bashuk. Let's say he made these matzahs to sell them in the marketplace to a person who needs a carbon taida, a person who or a nazar. These matzahs apparently they could be baked. Not to be baked. They can be baked by other people. So you have this person who's trying to make a few bucks. He bakes matzahs and he goes into the marketplace and he looks for a guy with long hair and he says, "Hey, you a nazar? Do you need these matzahs for your carbon?" Or he makes an announcement. Anybody being a carbon taida need matzahs? He's selling matzahs to these people. So he baked it for the purpose again of a nazir or for a carbon taida.
But not for him.
Not for his personal use. He baked it for others. Yaitzin behen, those you could use for Pesach. In that case, what's happening is like this. In that case, you're selling it in the marketplace. What if you don't have a good day? And there's no Nazirim around, and there's no people who need carbon taida around. Or you sold some, you still have left over. What are you going to do with them? You're going to then use it for yourself. The point is that when you make it for yourself, you made it for yourself. Now you changed your mind. Here, this person made it for those people, but he knows that if he has any extra left, what does he want to do with it? He wants to use it for himself. And therefore, in that situation, we say that we can actually use them for Pesach. Because we say that a person has in mind that I'm not going to be able to go ahead, if I'm not going to be able to sell whatever I don't sell, I'll eat it for myself for Pesach. So therefore, if you're making it for yourself and you change your mind, okay, you didn't have it in mind for Pesach. But the person baking and selling to others, he has in mind Pesach for whatever's left over, and therefore you can use it for the mitzvah. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you, Rabbi. The word is Cantonists.
Ah.